welcome to the Free Your Authenticity podcast. I'm your host, Chrissy Datu, also known as datu.intuition on all socials, but primarily TikTok. If you haven't seen my content before, I create spiritual, astrology, numerology, tarot, and manifestation content for the most part, but essentially anything woo-woo, anything in that divination realm is up my alley. So if that sounds of interest to you, then you're in the right place. I used to be a skeptic with this stuff, which is so funny that now it's what I do for a living. I have never really been a spiritual person. I grew up religious, but I didn't really resonate with it as much. So I kind of veered away from it as I got older and was out on my own. But then, to my surprise, during the pandemic, I ended up really seeking the guidance of a higher power, but I didn't want to go back to the religion that I was raised in. So I was really looking for something to believe in. And I think astrology was definitely one of those first things I started with. And then I got more into tarot readings, which I also was really skeptical about for a while. In the pandemic, I think I felt really lost, as most of us did. And so I started going to therapy for the first time in 2021. And that really opened my eyes to a lot of things. And I will never forget what really started me on this spiritual journey, or at least got me open-minded to it. It was with my first therapist, and the first book that she ever recommended to me was The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. That is really what got me on spirituality. And it was great because she was very good about being like, listen, I know you're not spiritual, but there's a lot of what they teach in spirituality that does coincide with what they talk about in therapy. So I think a lot of it is just really helpful knowledge to know, but you can take the spiritual aspect out of it, just kind of get down to what they're actually trying to teach you and the skill sets that they're trying to speak on. So I was like, okay, sure. And if you haven't read that book, it's all about mindfulness. I never really knew about spirituality outside of religion. So this was a really cool way for me to discover that for myself. And I really enjoyed what I was learning. So I just kept diving deeper and deeper into it. I let my intuition guide me, which that was a whole thing to discover in and of itself. Fast forward to 2022. I remember I was on a trip with my friends, and one of my friends brought an oracle deck with her, and it was this animal spirit oracle deck. And we were all pulling cards, and it was just for fun. And then I ended up pulling the hummingbird card, which now is, it's just such a big sign for me spiritually. And whenever I need guidance and I really need a sign from the universe, I always ask for a hummingbird, and I get it. And since then, I have actually gotten this hummingbird tattoo for those of you who are watching the video. This hummingbird card told me to dive more into my spirituality because it said that I was starting to get into it and I should do more of that. So that was my sign to do that. And then right after that, I ended up getting a reading from this psychic that my friend recommended to me, who's amazing, by the way. Her name is Marianne Reiger. You should look her up. She does virtual readings, but she's based out of Ohio, and she's always incredibly spot on. I was such a skeptic when it came to psychics, but everything that she's ever said has come true, and she reads me like a book, so it really made me a believer. But I got a really accurate reading from her, and she told me that I was going to start something. And I said, well, the only thing that I could think of is maybe diving more into astrology and numerology and spirituality and all of those things, because I'm starting to learn about it. And it's just been a really fun hobby for me. And she's like, yeah, maybe that. But I still don't think anything of it. And then 2 months later, there was the 111th day of the year, which opened up a 111 portal. And if you don't know about portals, essentially when there's an angel number like 111, 222, 333, and so on, it opens up a portal. And when the date coincides with those angel numbers, it's really supercharged. The main gist of it is that it's a really great day to manifest your deepest desires. And 111 is a really great day to do that. I manifested that I would start a TikTok page where I would talk about spirituality, astrology, and all of those things that I'm interested in, and I would get a following from it. I ended up brainstorming the name for my TikTok page, which was datu.intuition, and I remember it just being this natural flow of inspiration, and I just followed that, and I later learned that this is called inspired action. So I was doing that. I was just going with the flow and I just felt really, really inspired to create this TikTok. So I was brainstorming ideas with my husband and then we eventually came up with the name. And then I was like, okay, why don't I just create the TikTok account? Let's just make it. So I created the TikTok account. I named it datu.intuition. I put my picture up. I made my bio and I just got it ready to go. And I was like, in a couple months, when I learned more about this stuff, I am going to actually post my first video. Didn't end up happening that way. The next day, I felt really inspired to just do a mock video. I was like, let's just practice doing a TikTok and let's just see what comes out of it. And I recorded it and then I edited it and I was like, you know what? It's actually not that bad. So I ended up posting it and it ended up gaining some traction. Now, this wasn't the video that made me viral. That was actually a couple videos later, but I ended up getting a couple thousand views on that and I was surprised. And then I started gaining some followers from that video alone, which really gave me the confidence to keep going. So I just kept going. I posted a bunch of numerology videos and then I started to post some astrology videos. And 2 weeks into me having my TikTok account, I went viral. This was truly one of the best days of my life to this day. It felt like a dream come true. And the song that I listened to that day was A Moment Like This by Kelly Clarkson. And I literally felt like I won American Idol. It was that same feeling of I made it. I really had my very first I made it moment in my life. And I thought I had experienced that before in things like my marketing career, but no. This felt completely different because this was something that I was so authentically aligned with. And that was the first moment that I really felt like I was doing something that was just for me. And it wasn't tainted by what other people were telling me to do. It wasn't being tainted by anything anyone was telling me to become. It was just me. It was just my authentic self. And I really didn't realize how much I hadn't tapped into that in my life up until this point. And it was such a beautiful moment. It was also around the time I was having my first spiritual awakening. So there was just a lot going on in my mind, body, and soul. And I will never forget it. I will always be grateful for that time in my life. Fast forward to now, 2.5 years later, almost 3 years later, I have a good amount of people following me on TikTok now. My page has since evolved to now talk about many other things, but it's all things that I'm interested in and authentically aligned with. And my latest wave of inspiration that came through was to start a podcast. So hopefully this is interesting to you. And if you feel aligned with my energy and you're excited to learn more about astrology, numerology, tarot, manifestation, then please make sure that you are following this podcast and that you stay tuned for the next episode. But thank you so much for listening to this very first episode and for bearing with me. I love you so much, and I'll see you next time. Mwah.